I went from living with my parents at 18 to renting an apartment at 19 to owning my own house at 20. Through each one of those periods of time, all I was doing was trying to chase more freedom. I wanted out of my parents' house. I quickly got sick of paying rent once I got an apartment, and I finally took action and bought my own house. And I bet that you're in a pretty similar situation because as a real estate agent, being young and still being pretty new to the business overall, I get a chance to work with a lot of first-time home buyers who are making this exact transition, either from living with their parents right into home ownership or from renting transitioning into home ownership. So in this video, I'm going to be giving you a little bit of an outline / game plan for those of you who are currently renters trying to make that transition to home ownership, because again, I do this a lot in my day-to-day work. And I also have my story of what I actually did myself from the years of 18 to 20 and actually buying my own house. So chances are you're probably currently renting or you're living with your parents. And I just want to say, if you're living with your parents, do not feel bad about it. There's no shame in living with your parents, especially when you're young, just out of high school, getting your first job. It's fine, but take every advantage you can if you're living with your parents. You're probably getting sick of not having your own space, and I mean like truly yours. Because if you're renting, I'm guessing that you're probably at the end of the line and you're just sick and tired of giving money every month and getting nothing in return ever for it, other than, of course, the roof over your head for the month. But when you give up that $1,500, $1,800, $2,000, whatever your rent might be every month, you're not going to see that ever again. It's not like it's a mortgage payment where at least when you're dishing out that cash, you know that it's going to paying down your mortgage and therefore building more and more equity in the actual house you're owning, and that does not apply when you're renting. And one thing I want to mention here is if you're renting currently and you like it, keep doing it. Like, there's nothing wrong with renting. Some people, I feel, are just built for it. That's the way their brain thinks. They don't want to have the responsibility of home ownership. They don't want to be the one in charge of fixing things when something breaks. Me personally, I don't like renting my own spaces out. I like owning my stuff, so I was not built a renter. I like to own my stuff and actually buy it. But again, some people are just built for it, and if that's you and you're completely content, hey, I think it's a steal if I get to pay $1,500 a month, live here, and not take care of it. If you like that, keep doing it. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm just talking about people who are trying to make that transition. And then if you're living with your parents right now, trust me, I feel that. I was living with my parents for a little bit out of high school when I was working my first job, and you're probably just wanting the space of your own. You're sick of going home to your childhood bedroom. You feel like, I've outgrown it, I want to move on, get my own space. When living with your parents, chances are you're living for super cheap if they're even charging you any rent at all, so therefore you should be taking every advantage of that and saving money instead of having fun and spending it on everything. Alright, so now we're going to get into a little bit of the game plan. And the first thing you're going to want to do is a self-audit to truly see what your current position is. How much money do you have saved? How many monthly payments do you have? How much debt do you have? How is your credit score? All these things are things you're going to want to start taking account because that's the way you get a loan for a house. And one of the things on the monthly payments and how much debt you have is you really want to look at it because a lot of people don't understand how much monthly payments can affect the buying power when it comes to purchasing a house. For example, a $400 a month car payment, just $400, could roughly cost you $90,000 of purchasing power. So it might not sound like, hey, I have a $20,000 car, it's only $400 a month. That affects you a ton because it's looked at a lot differently in the debt scheme of things, because again, with like credit cards, they're looking at your minimum monthly payment. With this, it's the $400 per month, and that gets taken into what they call a debt to income ratio, and that's how they can decipher how much they want to give you as a loan to actually make sure you can afford that loan. So focusing on savings is going to be like the main point you really want to put in the front of the line, because yes, there are a bunch of state programs, a bunch of government type loans that you can get into houses for relatively cheap. And a lot of people will see that and think, hey, I don't really need that much money to go buy a house. And that's not really the case. You still are going to need to save up some cash to actually be able to pay for the stuff at the closing table. Even if you have some things that are going to be lower in cost, you still have to bring some money to the closing table. So that is one thing that you want to mention. And now the next question you probably have right on your mind is, well, how much do I need to save? And this question can be very, very variable depending on who is asking it, because it really is more of what you can afford, how much you're getting paid at your job, and all that. But a good way to look at it is just a little bit of an outline in percentage-wise. So typically the first-time home buyer is going to get what they call an FHA loan. It's a government-backed loan, and it's 3.5% down. And then for closing costs on the actual house is usually around 2 to 5%. So whatever you think you can afford, you're going to want to save at least 8 to 9% of that in cash so that you're ready and you're prepared when it comes to actually purchasing the house. And again, there are state programs that can even help you with down payment assistance. But again, I highly suggest planning for worst case scenario. It's better to have some money left over than not to have enough at the table for closing. And another thing you're going to want to look at again is your credit score. How is that? Do you actually have a credit score? Because again, this is what they're going to be basing what they're giving you for a loan off of. So if you have a low credit score, well, guess what? You're going to be paying a higher percentage on the overall loan, which costs you way more in the long run. And it can even be more expensive with upfront costs to actually buy the loan and get to the closing table. If you're someone that has zero credit score and you're like, well, I don't really know what to do, there's a great thing called secured credit cards, and I highly recommend it for people who are literally just starting out, whether you're like 18 or maybe you're a little bit older, but you never got into credit because maybe your parents had a bad experience and told you never to get credit cards. But again, you do need a credit score to get a home loan. So a secured credit card, all it is you go down to a bank. A lot of banks have this program. Just call around, see which one has it. You go, you open up a credit card account, and you deposit $500 into that account. But you use it like a regular credit card. So you do some charges on it. You pay it every month or pay it off every month, which I do with all my credit cards. So the balance is zero every month. I never have to pay the interest, which is very nice because then it's just like a bank account. So you pay your credit card, and then usually it's like a 6-month time period. And if you're all good in those 6 months, you don't miss a payment or anything like that, they give you your $500 back, and then you do have a $500 line of credit with them because you've basically shown proof that, hey, I know how to pay my credit card and I'm not just going to stiff you and run away. So that is a great starting point for building credit. And again, this is not, please don't take this as like, hey, go rack up a bunch of debt. Do not do that. That's not what I mean by building your credit. I mean, if you don't have any, go get a secured credit card, use it just like a debit card, put a charge on it, pay off, do that, be smart with it. And then another thing, if you really want to go above and beyond, is you call a local lender. So call someone who actually does home loans and tell them your plan. Say, hey, I'm looking at buying a house. It's not going to be anytime right away, but I'm looking probably like a year or so out. I'm just giving a call to see, what should I be focusing on? They can probably give you like a little bit of a audit to be like, hey, these are the things that we look at the most. And depending on who the lender is, they might even be like, well, what's your current position? And then they'll like give you a little bit of a game plan to work towards that home purchase. But I suggest if you do that and you're using that lender's time, please use them when you actually do buy the house, because again, as a real estate agent, I'll help you any day of the week, even if you're not ready to buy. But it's very nice if you come back to use us when you actually do buy. And the last thing I want to touch on is making sacrifices, because again, I've been in your position. You're young, you're just getting going in life. You probably don't have the best paying job. I certainly know I did not. When I bought my first house, from the time I was 18 to 20, the highest I ever made in my W-2 career in that time was $16.50 an hour. I was not getting paid a lot, but guess what? I learned how to save money and I learned how to be responsible with my expenses. But in saying that, I had to make a decision. I think around 18, 19, I made a decision to go buy a pickup truck. It wasn't a brand new pickup truck, but it was nice to me. It was a used pickup. I had a monthly payment. It was a few $100s a month, but when I went to go get pre-approved, I could get pre-approved with that on my debt to income ratio, but the purchase price that I could get pre-approved for was just way too low. So I just had to have a conversation, and they're like, look, if you get rid of your truck payment, that's going to go up substantially, because again, like I told you in the beginning, $400 a month can equate to like $90,000. I think mine was around mid twos to 300s, but I cut mine down and it bumped that purchase price up. So I'm not saying this is all going to be sunshine and roses, but again, if you're wanting to go buy a house, chances are you're going to have to make some sacrifices to be able to afford it. So again, planning is going to be like your best friend when it comes to going to buy a house, because a lot of people just kind of jump into this frantically. They're sick of renting and they're like, let's go look at houses. They just go immediately to looking at houses instead of being like, well, let's plan to buy a house, because the planning's the biggest part. Understanding what you need to save, when you want to buy, how much everything's going to cost per month compared to rent, if now is the right time to actually make that purchase. All this stuff gets like brought into the game plan. So if you're actually planning 6 months, a year in advance to actually going and start looking at houses and really being serious about buying, you're going to be so far ahead of the other competition that's going out into the market. And I think it's also just a good time to get your personal finances in order. Because again, if you're in the position where you're either renting, you're young, you're living with your parents, this is a good time to kind of get your head on straight with personal finances. Understand what's coming in, what's going out, and figure that out. Because a lot of people that are currently renting, I know a lot of them, I used to be one of them, none of them really have a serious amount of savings because they're just so used to that money in, money out, money in, money out, money in, money out every month. They just are used to not having anything left over. And again, you are probably going to have to make some sacrifices, because the only way, if you're not saving any money right now, the only way to save money is either to cut back what you're spending or you make more money. And it's just that simple. So that's kind of what I want to leave you with. This was more just like bluntly telling people, hey, if you do want to make the transition from renting to ownership, you're going to have some savings. You're going to want to get your finances in order, your credit in order, and actually like devise a plan for buying a house, because it's a life-changing thing. You're spending a ton of money. You're going into a lot of debt. Of course, it's not necessarily, I don't look at it as bad debt because I buy multifamily, so other people help me pay for my debt. But the way I look at it is you want to plan for this purchase because it is a life-changing purchase, and I hope this kind of helped you realize what you need to get in order. I didn't want to go into anything specific on like how much it's going to cost, because again, it's highly variable. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you start implementing some of this and planning ahead for your home purchase. And if you're looking in New Hampshire, feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to talk things over and get you in a good position. So I will catch you guys next week.